Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. We are back at the Cozy Conference for the third of 4 sessions today, Ignite-style sessions. So most of you will have seen, because you've been in the audience before, although some of you are new. Hello, welcome. The idea of an Ignite presentation is that you have 5 minutes to talk about anything you like, and you've pre-prepared a slide deck with 4 slides a minute, so 20 slides in total, 15 seconds each, and they'll progress automatically, and there's nothing you can do about it. So today we've got all sorts of talks. We've had talks about sustainability and the city and utopias. We've just had a session which was really interesting about medicine and longevity and anti-aging. And now we've got talks about society and governance, touching on things like finance as well, and care, and storytelling, which is going to be interesting. So we've got Patrick, Hurley, Steve, Flatt, Teodora, Manea, and Hayley Trowbridge. Amazing. So they'll each have 5 minutes to talk, and then once we've finished, we've got a Q&A as well, and hopefully we'll wrap up at about 1:45, 10:45, something like that, before our 4 o'clock, our final session about transportation. But Patrick, do you want to kick us off?
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Great. So, why UBI? Universal Basic Income is this policy which is tailor-made for 2049. We've had all sorts of economic policies in the past. What we need is cash for everybody, and 2049 is the year it's going to happen. A little run through about the history of democracy, because that's what we do here at MakeFest. What we've had is the history of democracy is being the history of increasing freedom for everybody, and I'm going to say that there's one step left to take. Because we don't live in this society anymore where the bosses have got big top hats on and the workers are risking life and limb to earn a living. But what we still have to do is we still have to sell our labour in order to buy stuff, in order to live. Now, in the past, what we've had is the state comes in and provides free education so that people don't have to sell their labour in order to buy education for themselves. The next thing that happened in the history of democracy is that the state comes in and gives state-owned council housing so that people don't have to sell their labour as much to risk life and limb to have somewhere to live. The next stage in the process, because I'm speaking far too fast for these slides, the next stage in the process is the health service. And the state comes in and provides free healthcare at the point of need for everybody who needs it, without having to sell your labour in order to have enough money to buy healthcare. Around the same time, the government introduces the family allowance, where everybody who's under 18 and everybody who's under 16 gets an amount of money every week purely by dint of being alive. Retirement in 2019, everybody who's over the age of retirement gets a certain amount of money every week from the government purely because they are still alive. I just think that we should extend that to people between the ages of 18 and 65 so that everybody gets it. And by 2049, I'm sure that we will have that. The history of democracy is the history of emancipation, and we need to emancipate even more people, and we're going to be doing that as the 21st century progresses. I'm going to deal with a few objections, because a load of people have always come out with objections to universal basic income, saying that it's not going to happen because of various reasons. Now, I'm just going to talk over this person because I'm on a time scale here.
In the Hornby Library on the first floor.
Are you pausing it? Fantastic.
Hornby Library on the first floor.
Oh, we don't. Okay. Yeah. I'm going. Okay, so people say it'll cause inflation, but it won't, because more money. In fact, we've missed a slide. Could you go back? Sorry. Yeah, this is the one. Won't there be too much money? Well, there won't be, because from 1984 on the left there up to 2018, there's more money in circulation now than there's ever been. But nobody thinks that. There just is. And this is the thing that people say, won't it cause inflation? Well, it won't, because In the same time period as there's more money than there's ever been, inflation has gone through the floor. So the kind of the textbooks that tell you that the two correlated, they're not correlated in the same way that you think they are. People will say it'll make people lazy. And won't it be awful that people won't be working all day long? Well, I think it'll be fantastic that people won't be working all day long, because nobody was put on this earth to spend 8 hours a day behind a Tesco checkout. Nobody was put on this earth in order to stand there with roadworks saying stop, go signs all the time. It's not what we're here to do. People say who'll pay for it. We're all interlinked. One person's income is another person's expenditure. We'll pay for it ourselves. Why should everybody get it? Why not just give it to the people who most need it? Well, we see the people who, if you give the government policy to the people who just most need it, and it's not universal, it's easier to take away. Make something universal. People with sharp elbows will make sure that they get it too. Why should everyone get it? Well, the robots are coming for our jobs. This is MakeFest. Everybody knows that all the jobs are going to get automated. And fantastic, they should be, and we should be living lives of leisure. And why should everybody get it? I can't remember what I was going to say to this slide, so just look at the slide and appreciate the colourful graphics, because I can't remember what I was going to say there. On this one, why should everyone get it? We've got a climate emergency, climate breakdown going on. Sorry to stop you, the planet is dying. Let's stop doing all the stuff that we do currently to earn a living. Let's just have a living by dint of what the government can do for us. We can then put our feet up and not contribute to climate catastrophe. So the history of democracy is the history of emancipation. We need more emancipation. We need more freedom. By 2049, we should have it. Fingers crossed anyway. Why UBI? Well, why not? Let's just get on with it.
Thank you very much, Patrick. So next we've got Steve, which I think ties in a little bit with this from the sound of it. So, yeah.
A bit. In the last 140,000 years, there's been no change in our genetic makeup. During this time, the way we thought about ourselves has changed little until the beginning of the 18th century. It wasn't until almost the end of the 20th century that thinking was seriously explored. Since the 1950s, technology has revolutionized our thought processes. For example, engaging almost constantly with a piece of glass, some minerals, and quantum physics. This addition to our lives has changed our thinking forever. We have always been threat-minded creatures, but the threats have changed. No longer are we threatened physically. We are now threatened by intellectual challenges. Wanting to beat the shit out of your boss may be desirable, but not wise. We did not evolve to reason, discuss, consider choices. Never has this dichotomy been clearer than in the last 3 years of the Brexit fiasco. This hapless process has occurred because most politicians continue to see political processes in terms of ideological and tribal terms, come up against the other outside our group, and we are naturally suspicious. If we continue to think this way, in terms of seeing threat and dealing with it in a primitive way, we will be living in a dystopian Mad Max kind of world by the middle of this century. Problem-focused thinking has to be left behind. Solving problems is a short-term way of coping. Destroy or run away, whatever we do, threat-minded thinking creates cycles, and we are now running into the end of another cycle in human history. The political elite maintain their power and position by controlling and excluding, aimed at protecting themselves. The population becomes disempowered. The elite bring about by their own actions that which they most fear, downfall. How do we change this situation? It may be already too late. Much is happening to try to move away from turbo-capitalism. A previous speaker has alluded to a universal basic income, a great idea, but actually probably only a step on the way. We need a new kind of thinking that is based upon possibility, not threat, thinking that works through cooperation, thinking that enables creativity, thinking that sees solutions to be created not problems to be removed. The change is subtle but profound and involves overturning millions of years of evolutionary success. It is a paradigm change away from the politics of greed and self-interest that we see at the moment. Marxism won't work either. It is about understanding that the long view is essential for all of us. Employees have to provide security for those that they employ. State governments must learn that welfare of the population is key. No longer can security be ignored, for with security comes sustainability, longevity, creativity and progress. Technology offers much, but it cannot provide the key to a fulfilling life, the opportunity to learn and to grow. So many children never get the chance to learn and grow, be creative and enjoy a good life simply because of the greed and short-sightedness of the few. Community, security and identity is essential to avoid that dystopian future. Organisations across the world are forming and developing new ways of working. It is not a single view that will make the change. Belief in a single simplistic model like capitalism would not be enough.
Hello everyone.
And it is close to delusion.
We've got an amazing Women in Science exhibition in the Hornby room right now. So do make your way up to the first floor, to the back of the library, and check out the Women in Science exhibition.
Maybe they'll also do that 5 minutes after it's ended. So we just had a Women in Science exhibition.
I need to go back one. Thank you. That one. What is required is a multiplicity of models that all seek to move towards a sustainable ecology, a sustainable use of resources. Most human beings seek security, an opportunity to share their world and a story, often over a pint. The sad part is that the scum rises to the top. They are least suited to have power. For them it is a personal goal and not an altruistic one. Most politicians are folk psychologists that seek to use it to maintain their own personal power and influence. Our thinking has to develop, and fast, to develop a philosophy that embraces trust, difference, inclusion and opportunity, communication and community. Communities and nations have to learn to trust each other and a common vision. There is no organisation on the planet that has a clear global vision. The nearest is the United Nations, which is dialogue and strengthening of multilateralism as a catalyst for the well-being of all persons and a sustainable planet. And there are the 5 main goals. In that vision paper is the description of problems, but no vision of what a sustainable planet would look like. If we have no view of what we want, how on earth can we move towards it? Time to think about what we want, not what we don't want.
Very much. Third up, we've got Dr. Teodora Manea with the Governance of Care.
So that's the way I try to imagine a new philosophy, if you want, for the society. And actually looking around in the Western societies, and not only, I have the impression that we are in a wrong paradigm. And what I want my model is a governance of care versus the governance of profit, which we have nowadays. What happened nowadays? We talk about care, but the care is marketized, is sold for profit. And this is the way, you know, the world looks like, with gigantic inequalities and actually in desperate need of care. My idea to talk about this was inspired by Thomas Piketty, who actually did an analysis of what happened with the capital in rich countries and what happened with the profit, and how actually we are in this situation that just a few people have so much power and so much money. And if you see, that is not disconnected for the society, because this is reflected in every aspect of it. I live in Rock Ferry, and from the train station to the posh area of villas there, you see this massive discrepancy of care and of social care, actually. This is John Tronto, a feminist philosopher who wrote about caring democracies, and this is my idea. So philosophers talk about the body politics, the way that the government is controlling our body, and actually it's not only that, our body is controlled by economics. And from when we pop into this world as children, we are subjects of profit. The society tries to make profit. This is the society we created. The costs of the nursery, because children are seen as a kind of hobby. Some people have, then they should pay for it. Father, you have children at the university. Yeah, well, they want to study, they want to have a degree. Pay for them. Why not? Again, children are regarded as a hobby and not as the people who will pay your pensions, the people who will rebuild the society, the people who have to work in the society. Oh, that's a problem. Who will work for us? Oh, of course, people from abroad. There are so many desperates there, and that's the colonial mentality still. I'm sorry to say it, but we rely on these resources. And you see, overseas doctors, more than a third of the doctors in the NHS were schooled abroad. They were schooled in countries like India, Pakistan, Romania, where in Romania, for example, every cost of medical education is paid by state. And all of this investment in doctors is going to the United Kingdom. Because what happened here? Well, we cannot create enough doctors for our needs. Care homes, our age, our frailty, after the system spits us out, after we are not more, workforce, we are subjects of profit. And even in our death, we are subjects of profit. What happened when someone died? I thought that's so wrong. Instead of families having a help from the state, they are robbed of, the last amount of money. So it's even expensive to die. We are low. We are a rich society, but still in a form of brutal capitalism. We creating ghettos of social failures. We prefer to pay the people to stay there, somewhere in the back of the society, somewhere a new ferry where nobody looks for them, instead of giving them the dignity to work, re-educating them, investing in them, letting them to flourish, letting them to achieve what they can do. So we need to reshape our thinking. We need to see how we invest in society. What are the children? What is our responsibility? What does it mean, education? What does it mean to take care of the elderly? They are not something, a burden. They are part of our dignity, and we are not doing it rightly. I was shocked, actually. Yesterday I realized that hospices are not funded by the state. They have to beg for money. So, healthcare, the NHS is unsustainable in this form. And we talk about free healthcare, but so many people are dying waiting, the waiting times. And not the rich people. The rich people have private insurance and they go to private hospitals. It's not egalitarian at all, the way the health system functions. Politics, the electoral system. I heard that, MPs just have 5 years. There's not enough time to make a sustainable policy, so they don't really care. And this is a very, very sad reality. We should change the system. So there are a few principles of philosophy of care, and this is responsibility, responsiveness, attentiveness, trust, competence, and respect. And I have good reason to argue that in our paradigm nowadays, lots of these things are failing. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you very much. So last up, maybe with a glimmer of hope in this one.
I hope so.
We've heard about lots of problems and the need for change. And I think hopefully Hayley's going to talk to us about maybe a way that we could we could make that change happen.
I'm being directed.
Make that change happen through storytelling, I believe.
Yes.
So.
Here, all right? Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about how storytelling can be used to dismantle some of the power structures that we have to create a bit more of an equitable world, a world that's less about silos, a world that actually just reconnects us to our own humanity. And I think stories are a great way of doing that. We've always told stories. People tell stories about their lives. We come back to work after the weekend, we say what's happened at the weekend. They're a great way that we can share, that we can learn, and ultimately that we connect with each other. I believe that people's lived experience matters. I believe that when people share stories, we get a better understanding of the world from their perspective, and it creates more understanding. But experiential knowledge isn't always seen as being as good as skill-based knowledge, like how you can code something. And it's not seen as being as good as academic knowledge or research or data. But I believe that experiential knowledge is very valuable to the human race. So, story curation is a way of helping us work with experiential knowledge. And by story curation, I'm talking about the gathering, organising, understanding and presenting back of learning through stories. A little bit like Google does when it curates the web for us. I believe that then in these stories we can find out some real insights, some real learnings from other people. It can open our eyes to different things. It can help us understand what that other person might have experienced and why. If we can do this with lots of stories, we bring voices together. We bring voices together that might be different. Like you said, there's not always one vision. We can bring multiple voices and multiple perspectives together that can help challenge our own perceptions of how this world is. If we can then share that with other people, then we can start to make a change. A lot of the time, our knowledge stays within small groups and we stay in echo chambers. Story curation, in the way I see it, is about getting that knowledge out there to enable other people to work with it. So this is a project I've been involved in, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about it and how we have started to try to do this little mini revolution of storytelling across Europe. So we had partners in Spain, Italy, UK, Poland, Germany, Sweden. So we started off going to another knowledge base, which was research. And we had a look what kind of things were happening about story curation and how people were doing this. We didn't find much. So then we started to try and design our own based on what we thought and what we knew. And we all deviated to trying to make a storytelling course. And it was like, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to give a platform, an equitable platform for learning from stories. So what we did was designed a story curator program that taught people how to work with knowledge in people's real stories. And we trained up about 15 or so people from across Europe how to work in that way. So Italy, they went back to Italy and worked with the local council municipality there. They decided they didn't want to, they only could do a few hours. They then asked for more because they realised that it would be a great way of understanding the residents in Milan much better than they already did. Sweden, the education organisation we worked with, took it back into their organisation, worked with their team to develop how that can help student learning better, how story curation can be embedded there. UK, we went with the NHS. We worked with a team of clinicians to identify patients who would share a story that could then improve that service for this patient. So we had doctors and professionals listening to what people were saying about their own medical care. Spain used it in a therapeutic way. They used it with people with experiencing mental health illness as a way of them telling and understanding their stories and how it connected to the wider world that we were in. So what did we learn? Well, if we're going to do this, we're all going to have to do it in different ways, as you've just seen. There's not one way to create change. There's not one way to do it. We also learned that sometimes people don't want to listen, and sometimes what you have to share with them doesn't always go with what their vision of the world is. So it's a little bit of this. If you go out and do this, and you go out and advocate for voice and to listen to folk, you're seen as a disruptor. I think it's common sense, but no, that's not what we found. What we saw is that it's a challenge to these power structures. If you say we've got another knowledge base that is of the people, not of the statistics, not of what you already think you know, or what of a policy you think is going to win you the next election, or whatever you're doing, it dismantles those power structures. However, if you can find people, hopefully like yourselves, who want to be a part of that, in those organisations, because they're people too with experiences, then you can start to change it within. And what we hope we've done on that project, and what we're trying to keep doing, is give people that tools and that way of doing it so that it feels a bit less scary when you're out there on your own advocating why voice and why people's lives actually matter.
Thank you very much. So this session has been about society and social change and how we're governed. And I want to pick up on one thing that I think it was that you said about this problem of scum rising to the top, because I think that's one problem that people always have, like, whoever you vote for, the government always gets in, or whatever, you know. How do we prevent that? How do we change that? Have that one.
It's all right, it's working now. Somebody switched it off. That's a really good question. I wish I knew the answer. One of the things that I do, and the people around me do, we tend to do what's called guerrilla warfare. And it's very much about this idea of disruption. And it isn't about direct change. It's about kind of pulling down the structures in small places. The idea of trust being built and connection and making more and more connections. And eventually, those people become isolated. I can tell you a very interesting story that Douglas Rushkoff talks about. He was invited to go to talk to what he thought was a conference in Switzerland of about 11 of the richest people in the world. And basically what they wanted to know from him was, when money doesn't work anymore, what do we do to keep people loyal to us? And he said, well, you don't find another currency. What you do is you start building loyalty now.
The mid-1800s, cooperatives forming across the UK, people ganging together to make sure that their own economic and social interests were being delivered by themselves. They basically couldn't trust Westminster, couldn't trust Whitehall, couldn't even trust the town hall in the places where they lived. So people in high streets across the north of England, across the Midlands, across the whole country actually, use the power of their collective endeavours to join together to force change and to force positive change and make sure that they rose to the top themselves. Whether they turned into scum in due course, not for me to say, but that's probably how I'd do it, collective action.
Yeah?
Thank you. Actually, a philosopher gave an answer to this question a long time ago. It's Karl Raimund Popper. He said there will always be corrupt people. We cannot prevent them to access the system or to come to the position of power. What we should do is to make sure that our institutions are so well designed that whoever comes there accidentally on the wrong merits will not stay there. And this is, if you like, the problem now in the United States. The real test is if the American institution will survive Trump. So this is how we should do. We should design institutions that are solid. They are based on trust. They are based on professionalism. They are based on integrity. And then whoever is there cannot do bad things.
Yeah, I'd totally agree with that. I was going to say something quite similar, but I think there's also like a point before that, and it's about the people who kind of apply or go on a track to those positions of power. How do we create a more equitable society that attracts people from a wider range of backgrounds that not maybe? Yeah, I think you described them as something like psychopaths or something like, yeah, but those people who might not necessarily be attracted currently to positions of power or may not feel it's for them, but how do we get that wider range of voices there in the first place? And then if we have institutions that have a much more fairer structure, and one what's based on trust and all of those kind of things that we've kind of been talking about, then that's how I would suggest we stop scum rising.
Okay, so I have a question leading off from what you've just asked, or what you've just said here. You build institutions to stop people taking advantage of their own narrow partisan interest, or you build institutions to stop the scum rising. But what happens when those institutions themselves are utilised for the purpose that they weren't set up for? So, for example, you've got the American president at the minute who might not respect the institutions that are there to keep him in check, but he packs the Supreme Court with people that are just going to be pursuing his own interest. You've got, in Russia, Putin explicitly coming out against notions of liberal democracy and trying to undermine the institutions. Now, I don't know whether the institutions themselves are strong enough to cope with people who explicitly set out to destroy them.
First, if I may say first, Russia is not a good example because everything what happened in the Eastern Bloc destroy the people trust in institution. The institution, we don't build them today. The institution are institution democracy, they go over 100 of years, okay? I understand what happened in the United States, but the judiciary system is just one of the 4 powering states. So even if he has one corrupt judge there should be the other mechanism still functioning, preventing that. But you know, we have here our situation, we have a parliament, and someone said that they might consider ignoring the MP's vote in some crucial issues. You know, this is when the institutions are attacked on their structure. And this is where I think the public and the essence of democracy is to preserve those institutions, because those are the only point where you can have trust. And, you know, in Eastern Europe, what happened in Eastern Europe, because those institutions were controlled by power and by aggressive totalitarian regimes, people do not trust those institutions. They have tyrants. They don't have a functional democratic system.
It's interesting that trust comes up a lot, and I know, like, that's one of the things. I like the idea of storytelling and sharing stories as one of these ways of building trust between either different people, different parts of society, or one of the problems that people have often said about, like, the UK now in the last couple of years is that there's this huge generational divide, for instance, where there's young people and old people seem to care about completely different things. So maybe things like storytelling or more of that sort of explaining where you're coming from might help heal that sort of division.
Yeah, obviously I agree. Yeah, and I think part of the process of storytelling, it's about building understanding through empathy. You don't have to understand at a logical level, you understand at an emotional level. And it enables people, for me, to just see other people, as human beings. So even those 2 groups of young people want this and old people want that, I don't even think that exists. I don't think all young people want this or all your old people want that. And I think when we start talking in demographics or we start grouping people and pitting them against each other, that's very destructive. If we see people as individual humans with their own experiences, their own thoughts and feelings, then we can connect much more rather than, you know, these pittings that we do. So even, I guess, for scum that rise to the top, I probably wouldn't say they're scum. I would probably say there are people, and, you know, I may not agree with all people, and, you know, some of them I would possibly think, yes, that would be my absolute label for you. But I think storytelling enables you to kind of see someone else's perspective. That's not necessarily saying you have to agree. That's not ever my aim. I'd never want consensus, really. But it's enabling you to see from that perspective why that person is positioned there in their world.
Just an observation. We currently have a world that is built upon money. An economy. And I find this really interesting because money is a concept in itself. It's an abstract concept, yet it's become something now that we grasp onto as populations. The economy of the world is creaking. You need to talk to people like Kate Raworth and others about donut economics to recognize that there are different models. And one of the things that I keep thinking about is that Parliament goes on holiday for 6 weeks every summer and nobody really notices. Yet the dustbin men go on strike for a week and everybody notices. We need to think about what our priorities are. We need to think about where the value lies, how we pay for value. And this is one of the things that you alluded to. I think it's really important that we begin to consider our values, because right now every one of us is measured by pound signs, by dollar signs, by Bitcoin. We're not measured by our value as a human being. And I think we need to start rethinking what actually are the values in our economy that are actually sustainable and important.
So this is an opportunity to throw it out to the floor. Is there any questions or comments that anybody's got and would like to make? No? Neil looked almost like he wanted to say something, but I think he's maybe thought better about it.
Can I?
Yeah.
I have a comment for my previous speaker about work. And for me, I have a different perspective and different understanding what work is. And the example given, like the lollipop man, or I don't know, doing jobs that nobody likes, like scanning in Tesco. Yes, there are those type of work, and it's sad people do not like them, and I totally understand. But most of us like what they do. Most of us are defined by our work. Most of us are desperate to work. In storytelling, in talking to these people, in interacting with people, because what's happened, if the society rejects your work, you are marginalized. You don't create social relationship. You don't have feedback. You don't fulfill a meaningful life. Work is actually a place where we gather our value. It's a place where we consolidate our dignity. It's a legacy we leave behind us, and it's important for us. And I want to see work in this way, it was a gentleman doing scans in Waitrose, it's true. His name was John, back in Devon somewhere. And he was asking people how they are doing. His presence there was fantastic. He was not a scanning machine. He was a presence you wanted to encounter. And that's even the most, trivial jobs. There are occasions for these people to get out of the house and to interact, to be part of a society which should respect them and trust them and, show care.
Yeah.
Okay, so just quickly in response, I'm not anti-work. I'm anti people having to chase jobs which don't fulfill their livelihoods purely to earn money. Now, sadly, I'm not getting paid for speaking here this afternoon, but my inspiration for doing it is separated out from the money motive, but I'm still gaining satisfaction and pleasure from doing this work, preparing 20 slides, speaking for 5 minutes, being on a panel. It's still work. It's just not work in the sense that I need to do it to get paid. I would do more of this sort of thing if I didn't have to sit at a desk 5 days a week doing what we call work. So I'm not suggesting that the human motivation and the sorts of things that people want to do to live fulfilling lives should be taken away from them. I think we should open up people's lives to be more fulfilling by doing work which means something to them, instead of work that they have to do in order to pay the bills. Nobody gets out of bed in the morning in order to jump for joy that they are in a telesales job selling people double glazing. And I've done that job, and it's completely demoralizing and undignified. And if we can get rid of people having to think that they have to work in order to do that sort of thing because that's what pays the bills, it frees people up to do this sort of thing where we can have meaningful, lovely conversations in a library on a Saturday afternoon. And now I want to see more of this and less of that.
I was going to say there's a huge voluntary sector in the UK, and there's everybody, loads of people, probably even here, volunteer their time doing stuff. They're either caring for loved ones, or they're tending a community garden, or all this stuff happens. And I think that's the thing that's always intrigued me about this idea of universal basic income, is the idea that maybe that would open the door to allow more people to do the things like that and to fulfill themselves through that, which is interesting.
The people doing volunteering, they are not people on social benefit.
No,
they are not. I tell you where are the people on social benefit. They are in Rock Ferry, in the pubs, with drugs, and they didn't work for generation. They are 3 generations, they didn't work, and you know, I talked to them, and they said, oh, they don't work. Work is for posh people. We created this monstrous society where work is regarded like this.
Go ahead.
Just an observation about UBI. There have been numerous studies around the world. I wrote a paper on it a couple of years ago. One of the things we do know is that once it's not about money, it's not about the money itself, it's about the security that it creates, that enables people to have space to begin to think and become creative, and actually be able to have community and time together and all those other things that are being described here. It's not about work. And the interesting thing is that the government currently using this idea that work is a good thing, 2 legs good, 4 legs bad, no, sorry, the other way around. They actually use 7 papers that suggest work is good. There are over 360 papers that illustrate just how good creative, non-paid, pastoral work is far more effective for mental health than work ever will be. And the other thing I wanted to say was, you've got organisations now, and Amazon is one of the ones that's been in the press recently, who are, the staff are now so frightened of losing their jobs that they take pop bottles in and they wear catheters in order to be able to continue to work, because they're so frightened of losing their jobs. One of the things that's happening is that so many people are now so scared that they're not going to be able to earn their money that they're actually damaging their own health in order to maintain that job. And that's part of the way that we are kept in this position that we're in, producing vast amounts of wealth for a very, very small number of people.
Hayley?
Just to comment on the kind of work thing, what seems to be being spoken about, I'd probably argue it's not whether it's work or volunteering or this or that. It's actually having a purpose in this world. That's what gets you out of bed in the morning. It's having a purpose as opposed to work and such. And I would say possibly the combining feature across those reports that say work is good, creativity is good, this is good, is that the finding will be that it enabled people to have purpose, I would imagine, because that's generally what I think people get out of the bed for.
Yeah, a reason.
Yeah.
Could I ask then about purpose, if that links to storytelling, if people can give their lives a purpose through kind of a thinking of a different narrative through which they complete their actions?
Yes, possibly. I think that we kind of, the way I see storytelling working in that kind of realm is it gives you a better understanding of intrinsic human values, and then it helps you design workplaces or societies or structures in which you can work towards them, because Amazon doesn't have to be that place where people piss in bottles. You know what I mean? Amazon could be another workplace. Even the call center could be a workplace that taps into some intrinsic motivations that go beyond economical value, because like you said, money is a concept. We didn't always have money. We've traded in other things. We've done other things as different economies. We have a volunteering, like the whole of MakeFest is based on gifting something to the city and to our makers and connecting with each other. So we have other economies and other ways of exchanging or transactions or however you want to call it. So yeah, I kind of see stories as kind of understanding them, and it's like, it seems daft because it seems like blooming common sense because we understand it. Like, how have we forgot about humanity and what makes us human? But we're kind of, I think, in a stage in society where we have forgotten or suppressed what we already know, and storytelling is a way of bringing that much more to the surface and the forefront.
Well, if I can, at this point, I'll draw us to a close because we've got to finish up and set up for the next session. This feels like something we could talk about for a very long time. But thank you very much to our 4 speakers today. A round of applause for them. Thank you. And thank you to our very attentive audience as well. Thank you for coming. And we hope you're enjoying MakeFest. It's still going on and there's lots more to see on all of the floors in the library. And we'll be back in about 10 minutes with our final session, which is, I think, going to be about transportation. So we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Thank you very much, everybody.